Coming up on episode 48 of the Up Full Life podcast.
And I think the groundwork was laid with a fantastic New Year's run in 2019, 30-minute tweezer on December 30th, 2019. That whole run was really above what, I'm a New York City guy, so New Year's run is my jam, and that one was really next level. I didn't go to Mexico in February of 2020, but from watching from home, those shows seemed to continue that nice level. But I mean, when you get the second night of tour this past summer, you're playing a Carini that's not only 23 minutes or however long it was, but explored some fantastic soundscapes and new territory. And
yes.
I feel like they have definitely evolved, and they definitely did level up this summer.
So obviously Axl's paying tribute to Biz Markie.
Right.
Now he goes into a story. Like, it's like, holy toledo. I mean, okay, so
While
here
he's
you go.
sitting at the piano?
So, how about this? It's just as exciting to get a story from Axl Rose during a concert as it is to get the Mockingbird or the Harpua.
I'm a bozo. Oh, yeah, I thought you had... You recognize it. I like that. Many people like that.
Let's make a toast forever and ever. Let's make a toast.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Up Full Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 48, coming at you live and direct from my mom's crib in Margate. Been riding waves, eating tuna hoagies, hanging with Lucy the elephant. Life is good. And we are so grateful you are tuning in. Episode 48 is brought to you by all the incredible blogs and message boards and internet sites that are part of the Jam diaspora, the live music community that we know and love. We'll be talking a little bit about that today and talking a little bit about the fish from Vermont, and it was taking me back to the embryonic roots and genesis, not only as me, a journalist in this space, but just in general, how pivotal and vital the early message boards of, OK Player, The Lesson, or in the jam space, fish.net, or websites like gadeal.com/fish, and of course JamBase.com. Go see live music. And then move into the blog era, and later my family currently live for live music, carrying on these same traditions. And message boards kind of went by the wayside with the advent of social media, but fish.net is still pretty vibrant. And though I stay away from Fantasy Tour, that also played a huge role in this evolution. And bloggers like Mr. Miner and writers like Benji Eisen and Jesse Jarno, and of course, one of my guests today, Scotty B, Scott Bernstein, or a Dennis Cook, or an Aaron Case, or a Deanne Herman. The list goes on. All these folks and all these sites played pivotal roles in the evolution of the jam community, the music, how the media covers it, supports it, emboldens it, discusses it, etc. So I wanted to kick things off for this very The Fish from Vermont centric episode of the Up for Life podcast with a nod to the message boards and websites that paved the way for people like me, Scotty B, and at this point, hundreds more. Before we get started on episode 48, just like to ask folks to please subscribe to the Up for Life podcast. Smash that subscribe button on your podcast platform of choice. Or, if you're so inclined and have the time, please rate and review the Up for Life podcast, preferably on Apple Podcasts, but really any podcast platform. Reviews go a long way to moving the algorithms in this direction and bringing new listeners to the Up for Life podcast. So really appreciate all of the wonderful, beautiful, touching reviews we've collected thus far. You can also support the work that I do with the Up for Life podcast and my music, media, culture reporting in general by contributing to my Patreon page. Patreon.com/upfullife. I'll send you some stickers and you'll get a bunch of hard to find music that's special to me. I keep it tucked away on the Up for Life Patreon page. You can contribute a couple dollars a month, whatever is clever. We are so grateful and so appreciative. And lastly, if you just want to holler at your boy, you can send me an email. b.getz@upfullife.com, b.getz@upfullife.com. Feedback, constructive criticism, suggestions, connections, what have you. We appreciate all the energy. And now let's get into episode 48. Yep, you heard that right. The Fish from Vermont on the Up for Life podcast, episode 48. You might be asking yourself, really, dude? A whole podcast about fish, but nobody from Fish or even tangentially connected to the band on the show? As I'm prone to say, yes, indeedy. As some people may know and others may not, I was a hardcore tour kid for many, many years with the Fish. My whole world revolved around the Fish, my social circle, my calendar. It just, where they went, I tried to go as often as possible for a really long time. And I wrote a little something about this relationship I have with the band that I'm going to read in between interviews. But I just wanted to just, as a disclaimer, just acknowledge, that they're a huge part of my life, always have been, and even though I'm not as hardcore as I once was, I still like to think of myself as an organism in the greater community. So with that, I'm coming to you live and direct from Margate, New Jersey, but just as a hop, skip, and a jump from Atlantic City, where Fish just wrapped up their mini summer tour, or the first leg, if you will, and who knows what's going to happen with Tahoe and the Gorge and the forest fires out west. Of course, I'm well versed in that, as I live in the Bay Area and spent many years in Grass Valley. So I want to send thoughts and prayers and all the love and energy to all folks affected by the fires. And whether or not Fish plays these shows really doesn't mean shit. But that said, they did play a bunch of shows, and I was really taken by their leveling up in the summer of 2021. And I'm not exactly sure why or how it came to be, because they had 17 months off, plus all the drama and fear and craziness of the pandemic and whatever the hell else happened during the past year and a half. And for them to hit the ground running and find their stride like night 2, so 0 to 100 real quick, that they kind of plateaued towards the end by the time they got to AC. But we still got 3 fantastic shows as far as I'm concerned. And before that, there were a number of great shows and great jams and just, seemingly new beginnings, even with very old songs. And I wanted to chop it up and break it down with people that I love talking fish with. One digitally, and one for the better part of 30 years of my life. So we're going to talk with Scotty B, Scott Bernstein, the main man running the show, driving the ship at JamBase.com for several years now, and before that with Hidden Track, and of course he's the guy behind YEMblog. He's one of the most respected and appreciated and treasured voices and humans in the fish community. He's chronicled the band for a real long time. So we're going to hear all about his path and his journey as a journalist, as a fish fan, and his take on summer 2021. He was kind enough to holler back on really short notice and gave me a half an hour of his time. So we give thanks to Scotty B. And then, like I said, I'm going to read a little something and talk about a little something else. And then we're going to chop it up with my main man, J.A., Jason Abrams of the Rock and Wrestling Connection. He's been on the show to talk fish a long time ago, but it's long overdue, my man J.A. So I'll give him his own proper introduction before he joins us. But for now, we'll hear a whole lot from Scotty B, JamBase.com, on episode 48 of the Up for Life podcast. Yes, indeedy. All right. Well, it is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to speak with my guy, Scotty B, Scott Bernstein from JamBase.com. Also, we know him from YEMblog, and he has deep roots writing about music in the jam scene and the fish scene. So I had to track him down in this little gasp for air we have between AC and the West Coast, and just hear a little bit of perspective by somebody whose, knowledge and takes, are some of my favorites in the community. So thank you, Scotty B, for your time and the Vine.
Oh, I'm honored to be here chatting it up with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's a long time in the making, and we've been kind of in the same sphere of influence over the years. I really appreciate what you do. And the way you bring yourself and your voice and just a really nuanced, human, authentic perspective of a live music fan. So I just want to, from the outset, thank you for your service and your work and your energy.
Oh, that means a lot coming from you, man. I feel very similar about you and your work. So that means a lot. Thank you.
Right on, brother. Yeah, man. We're just trying to tell the stories, and that's what kind of today's about. Most people probably know who you are, where you've been, what you do, but for those less initiated, I wanted to just kind of get the scoop. First, the genesis of your relationship with fish, and also how did you get involved with writing about, jam music, and then eventually end up, editor-in-chief at JamBase?
Sure. Well, I went to a summer camp for 10 years in northeastern Pennsylvania. And one summer I came back and all of a sudden my friends were into the Grateful Dead. I had barely heard of the Grateful Dead, let alone their music. and was psyched to check out the music of the Dead, and certainly enjoyed what I heard. And these guys had a collection of like 50 bootleg tapes, and they were all about listening to them once and then moving on to the next one. And when they eventually ran out of new Dead tapes to listen to, they put on Lawn Boy by Fish, and I remember hearing Reba, and the Bag It Tag It chorus just caught my attention. And I got home a few weeks later, and that was what stuck with me more than anything else I heard that summer, and went out the day I got back from camp and bought Lawn Boy. And I'll never forget where I was in my bedroom, pressing play, hearing the Squirming Coil come out. And by the end of the Squirming Coil, I was like, this is my jam. This is my thing. And just fell in love with the band. And it was at a time, unfortunately for me, where Fish wasn't touring that fall because they were recording Hoist in California. This was 1993. So that my first chance to see them came the following April when they played 3 nights at the Beacon Theater in New York City. And I was 16 at the time, tried to explain to my parents why I needed to see 3 nights of the same band in a row. They weren't having it, especially on the school nights, but went to see the final night, the Friday night, and just had a life-changing experience. And it was the same thing. They opened with Llama, and by the end of Llama, I was like, I want to do this as much as possible. That night, the Giant Country Horns came out during Susie Greenberg. Still haven't seen the Giant Country Horns play with Fish since. And wound up seeing 8 shows in '94, and just built from there. And I saw my 300th show in 2019, and met a lot of friends through Fish, and got involved with a private message board in the mid-aughts. And through this message board, I met a guy named Slade Somer, who's at Slade on Twitter. And he ran a blog called under the pseudonym Ace Cowboy, and got asked by Glide Magazine. They wanted to start a blog off of their website, and asked Slade to start it. And he liked what I had written on this message board and thought I would be a good fit for this blog. So we got together, we plotted it out, we decided to call it Hidden Track. And this was 2006. We launched it in 2006. The idea was that I'd contribute an article a week. Within 2 months, I was contributing an article a day. Really just loved it, and I was always a big fan of the jam scene and of Fish and the surrounding bands. And Slade had to was spending too much time on Hidden Track, and I had a job, really weird situation, but it afforded me as much time as I needed to work on Hidden Track. And I think it was about 2008 or 2009 where Slade kind of handed me the keys and was like, you take it over. And I ran Hidden Track, and started, covered. Fish came back in 2009. In 2011, I wanted to come up with an interesting way of covering the shows beyond just recaps. And I'm a big sports guy, a big stats guy, and came up with the idea of the skinny, of, having a rundown of stats from every Fish show. And started that with our Fish coverage for Hidden Track in the summer of 2011. A couple of years later, the JamBase was in need of an editor. I got into discussions with them, and I certainly wanted to do this full time and get paid for it after not getting paid for it for 8 years. And in 2013, came on as editor, eventually became editorial director, and that's where we are now, with the only side trip there being when Fish was starting to come back, there was this explosion in content about the band. There were all these people digitalizing their analog tapes. There were people starting blogs like Mr. Miner. There were videos on this new website called YouTube going up. Mm-hmm. And I had this dream one night where I saw this website that was just a hub to show off all this new content that was coming about Phish. And I decided to start a site called You Enjoy My Blog, which very quickly became YEMblog. And the idea at first was to have a website with just links to all of the content that was being created about Phish. But what really caught on and what still resonates to this day is the Twitter feed. And the biggest part of that was because when Phish came back in Hampton in 2009, YEMblog first it was me, and then I brought other people in to do it, contributors. We were sharing the set list and notes from the show as it happened, and Phish wasn't even doing that at the time. Phish from the Road didn't come around for a couple of years after that, and have tens of thousands of followers on the YEMblog Twitter. And, that's been my foray, really, where I get to completely devote myself to Phish, because I don't want to turn JamBase into a Phish-only site. And it's certainly, there's plenty of Phish on JamBase, but I want to have that separation there. And that brings us up to where we are now.
Right on, dude. I mean, I ask a first question at the beginning of every podcast, and seldom is the response as thorough and check as many of the boxes as that one did.
Awesome.
So, really awesome, and great to kind of just give us the journey, because as you know, my roots in this thing are with JamBase. We had a little crossover time right when you got there, and I'm really proud of JamBase. Like, I'm proud of my own history and association with them, and especially where you've taken it since you arrived. It's really just an amazing site, super thorough, and has a lot of integrity and intention. And that's important to me. And I think it was a beautiful thing to experience the 20th anniversary with the old school crew and your era, and with some musicians that have touched our lives. And it's funny because, Andy Gadio founding the site, same situation. He had gadio.com/Phish, and he needed to kind of maintain more of an egalitarian situation at JamBase. It couldn't be so Phish heavy. And you were faced with a similar conundrum along the way. That's kind of ironic. And yeah, I think our whole thing really rooted on message boards and the nascent internet free exchange of ideas and music. And that has really extrapolated into so many directions, all, with what you do, with what I do. And, even though we don't only talk about Phish, I mean, Phish is the lifeblood. It is the organism that makes the whole thing so vibrant. And so that's why I really think it's important to have people in the community like yourself, just so dedicated, so passionate to, chronicling Phishtory. And then you do it with, everyone has their own lane. You got stats guys, you've got emotional guys, you've got setlist guys, and, you're all those things, and you're also the flips the desk guy. So I just love the role you play in the community, and the voice you give to the passionate fan who, again, you're a big baseball cards guy, you're a big stats guy, and you bring that ethos, that mindset, that passion, that, dedication to chronicling live music in general, but especially Phish. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today, because I'm really inspired by this summer tour. And before we get into the music itself, I was curious, your own take. Obviously, we were on our computers a lot during the pandemic. We had the dinner and movie series, which was incredible gift, keys to the Wayback Machine, as I like to say. We also had the really unparalleled, unrivaled, unprecedented Beacon Jam situation. And of course, you had the opportunity to sort of tell those stories online and also interact with fans way more, deeper, more emotional. So I was curious what, if any, changes or evolutions in the tenor or vibe of the fan base as we came out of, I guess, the first pandemic, and got an opportunity to go to shows and see one another and experience the music together. Did you feel a shift of any kind?
I would say certainly we were there for each other when the pandemic first started. And we were all missing live music and missing Phish, and the dinner and a movie experience was so great. It was so nice to have something to look forward to, especially in the early days when it was every week, and got to forget about the horrors of the pandemic for a few hours and reconnect. But I will say I feel like a lot of that amazing vibe and love was kind of lost at the beginning of this Phish tour, because of there's people that were upset that certain people weren't masking, and with the whole people anti-vaxxers versus vaxxers. So while I love what the band did over the first few weeks of this tour, I was a little turned off by the community, to be perfectly honest.
That's a fair, straight take, and you would know. I have to say that stuff that you referenced with regard to masking and vaccines has destroyed a number, or I shouldn't say destroyed, but has really harmed multiple communities that I'm a part of. Burning Man communities, festival communities, New Age, yoga, let alone what we've experienced with Phish, and then the jam scene macro. And yeah, of course we all, because we're online, we see what everyone has to say and thinks, and we can argue till the cows come home whether or not social media is a gift or a curse. But yeah, I guess maybe like I saw it through rosier glasses, because when I went to the shows or when I was communicating with people online, there was just a real vibrant investment into the band again, as in real time. And I had the opportunity to talk to different friends about their own experiences, veterans, people who have kind of strayed, much like myself, and found our way back because of the nostalgia that came over us through Dinner and a Movie and the incredible gift that was the Beacon Jams. But I, too, have been turned off. Maybe I'm just desensitized to the division. But when I went,
and it sounds like you're better at the signal to noise ratio.
Okay.
And I also think that in person it's a lot different, or over the phone talking with people. I'm just talking about my feed on Twitter or Facebook. And I think it comes down to we all have different comfort levels with how we feel, and you just got to respect how people feel, and to try to change them is just gonna not end well. You know?
It's an exercise in futility for
yes.
sure. I would agree, but then we could talk about the music, because that's what's really important.
Absolutely.
Here. And I, for one, was so inspired and just kind of blown away by the how rapidly they found their stride. If anything, maybe the tour, they found it so fast that there was no much more higher they could take it after
Great point.
Deer Creek. But that said, it's not like they fell off a cliff or anything. It's just the highest of highs were early on. And again, I'm curious because, again, I've left and come back, and I've always been a part of the community, but not thumb on the pulse for the past decade like yourself, or longer, obviously. But for me, I've been kind of in, touch and go with it since about 2013. And I came back strong for the aforementioned reasons, and have been streaming every night and on Twitter and reading Phish.net and you name it. And the Skinny, of course. I wanted to just ask you, in your opinion, somebody who has been thumb on the pulse for as long as we can remember, did they level up this summer, whether with chemistry or sound design or gear, or was it the playing? To me, and again, I didn't go to the Baker's Dozen, but that would be maybe the high bar that I would hold stuff against. Did you feel a leveling up, at least in the first half of the run?
Absolutely. And I think the groundwork was laid with a fantastic New Year's run in 2019, 30-minute tweezer on December 30th, 2019. That whole run was really above what, I'm a New York City guy, so New Year's run is my jam, and that one was really next level. I didn't go to Mexico in February of 2020, but from watching from home, those shows seemed to continue that nice level. But I mean, when you get the second night of tour this past summer, you're playing a Carini that's not only 23 minutes or however long it was, but explored some fantastic soundscapes and new territory. And
Yes.
I feel like they have definitely evolved, and they definitely did level up this summer. I think that's a great phrase. And the two shows that I saw in person were Alpharetta, and I sure picked well. In my opinion, those two shows were just fantastic in not only just the improvisation, but they played songs like Foam with authority. And that was something I felt was missing over the 3.0, especially in the later years before 2021, was because they didn't do any repeats at the Baker's Dozen or in fall 2019. They often would go without a net and without practicing clearly too much before playing a song. And I felt like songs that like Foam and Destiny Unbound this summer were just played with a power and ferocity that was incredible to see. And I think a big part of that was not being dependent on how big the repertoire was, being open to playing free 4 times, and each one got better. So there's something to be said for that. I love bust outs and rarities, as much as probably anyone. But I think after pretty much anything is rare in a bust out after you haven't played for 17 months. And there is definitely something to be said for being able to play a song, really think it went well, and then 4 nights later being able to go at it again
And take it somewhere else. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you make a good point about a Foam or a Destiny. There's a statement, like it's subtle, intentional statement to say, like, we're not just going for it, like we've worked this out and remembered who we are. And then at the same time, the without a net stuff, the type 2 stuff, which, frankly, that's always been my thing. I've never really been a stickler so much about how perfectly something was played. Now, when it's played awful, that's that. But when they get to the jam spaces, whether it's traditional jam spaces in a Reba or a Bowie, or the stuff we're talking about, this wide open stuff that happened in Carini or Simple or even a Blaze On, where they are so, we talk type 2, but they're in another stratosphere sonically, musically, and that's what I was asking about the leveling up, is I found myself, I listen to a lot of the streams in headphones, so I'm getting all the clarity, all the nuance, every last little bell and whistle. And I was just astounded by the confidence and the patience and the intention of these jams. For a long time, people talk about the length of jams, like Tahoe Tweezer or whatever you want to name. And sure, there's passages of all that stuff that are really dynamic. But what I noticed this summer, and again, I could just be late to the party, it seemed like the whole journey was intentional. Now, occasionally they may lost their way and kind of discombobulate and find themselves again, but there was storytelling and intention and sort of a beginning and ending point of these sojourns. And I just found them to be so remarkable. And really, they single-handedly brought me back to the band on an every night basis because I wanted to know where the search for new land was headed next. And just, you know, who knows what got them there. It's interesting that you say that they planted the seeds on that New Year's run in 2019, which is mostly remembered for the Stuck platform. But yes, really strong 4-night run. I haven't been to the Garden since the New Year's run in 2012, and ironically, that's the last time I really walked out of a show with my heart in my hands and my head in the stars was 12/30/12. But that happened to me on Saturday night in AC, just because I really just had the opportunity to surrender to the music without a care in the world, and they delivered, you know, that really vintage first set, and then some really ambitious stuff in the second set, but maybe not what they did early in the tour in an Alpharetta or a Nashville 2 or a Deer Creek 1, but it was still remarkable and as good as anything I could remember in a very long time. But do you think that the time spent away from one another, okay, they plant those seeds on the New Year's run in 2019 and then into 20 and then maybe in Mexico or what have you, and then they go their separate ways for 17 months, and sure, there were some link-ups at the Beacon Jams and guys stayed active in their own way, but that's why I asked about hitting the ground running, is to connect that performance at the Garden and what we saw this summer is just ridiculous, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Trey talked about during the Beacon Jams and during the SPAC and Beacon Theater shows that he played in front of audiences before Fish Tour, about how he would just spend his pandemic playing guitar and would even work with Jeff Tansky and meet in a safe place that they would just play music together all day. And I think that the four of those guys just spent a lot of time working on their craft over the pandemic and were able to hit the ground running. And I think would be remiss if we don't talk about Paige McConnell, who was the MVP in
Sure.
my opinion, and really has such a huge rig at this point and made exceptional use of all of the different instruments within his rig over the course of those jams, especially the new Moog synthesizer,
Yes.
which just some of the tones that he was getting out of that. I know you picked up our JamBase's CEO, David Onigman, who's Davo SF, I believe, on Twitter, did a great thread.
Fantastic
about this,
thread, like my
this
favorite
tour.
summer tour thread. Yeah.
And he was talking about, you know, just how much of an impact those synthesizers and the Wurlitzer. Paige was just you know, I love electric piano. I love that analog sound. And I feel like it's interesting. I feel like Trey is so much less likely to, as the jaded vets say, ripcord a jam when Paige is playing electric piano. It's a really weird thing. I feel like they'll always continue to push forward while Paige is playing Wurlitzer. And I don't know why that is, but I love it.
Thing keeps churning and oscillating, and before you know it, you're like surfing the rings of Saturn. It's incredible. And you're right. Paige is kind of the guy who's taking the reins when they're going, you know, out into the, you know, intergalactic shit. So right on, man.
And another thing that I just want to pimp is their listening skills. I mean, if you go back and listen to that tweezer from Alpharetta, as soon as the jam starts, Mike plays this pattern of like 4 notes, and immediately the other 3 band members pick up on what he's doing, and that sets the tone for the whole 34 or however long that was. Fish has always been great at listening to each other. We know about the hey-hole exercises and stuff like that. But in particular, the fact that these guys are still playing together after 37 years is paying such huge dividends this summer.
Yeah, and it's incredible. for lack of a more suitable term, that they're not only are they playing together, playing well together, but they're pushing the envelope in an authentic way still. And I mean, it's hard to find a peer in that regard that are really, you can say what, and I say it, about the big boat stuff and the sort of like pedantic nature of some of the material, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, the performances speak for themselves, where they go with it. And, if they want to write, ditties of that nature, who am I to begrudge them that? But for me, what, gives me a chub is that outer spatial, adventuring. And we saw so much of that this summer. So I have a couple questions, not controversial, but I want to wrap up with two questions. One about the music and one about the community. Obviously, there's lots of different discussions and dilemmas in the Phish community with regard to what they play and when. After everything you described and we've discussed about the sort of anxiety and apprehension and tensions between everybody given the circumstances, I think it was just an incredible run of shows that was medicine for the fans. But yet at the end of AC, we're left arguing over whether or not they should have played Numberline after Fluffhead. Now, I'm not a Numberline guy, but I am a guy who understands the feels and also, had an opiate addiction for many years, understand the nature of the song, what it means to them, what it means to many fans. So, I'm not here to hate on that. At the same time, is there a higher bar or a deeper bow than a standalone Fluffhead encore to end a tour? Where are you there? Where does Scotty B stand in that discussion?
It was bonus Phish. It was just an extra 5 minutes of Phish. I get that there is something to be said for ending on the Fluffhead note, but I don't think anything was taken away by the fact that they played this 5-minute song that means a lot to them. I am not a huge fan of the song, but I, like you, can appreciate what it means to their history. And, it just isn't something that is going to get me worked up to get a bonus song. That it's not like it took away a slot from something else.
Yeah, agreed, and that's a fair take, and I'm not mad at it. I would have probably personally preferred the standalone Fluff. Then I read this thread about this gentleman who passed away, and they were spreading his ashes, and that was his song, and I just was like, come on. I mean, that was a beautiful story, and it kind of made the whole argument ridiculous when you find out what it means on that level. Lastly, we obviously have an uncertain future. You touched on how you were turned off about the division and the sort of the tenor of the commentary between fans. It hasn't gotten any better with the announcement of proof of vaccination, etc. Are you comfortable going to shows this fall tour, and do you think that they're even going to happen?
I do. I think they're going to happen. If they were closer to me, I don't think I'm going to make it out west. Just on a financial and time level, I certainly am hoping that they wind up adding some shows, be it the New Year's run and perhaps maybe some Thanksgiving week shows. But I'd be open to going. But I don't have kids. If I had kids that can't get vaccinated, I'd feel much differently. And I have so much respect for people that are not seeing shows because they don't want to take the risk of contracting the virus and spreading it to their kids who can't get the vaccine. It'd be this live music scene cannot deal with another full shutdown. I really hope that doesn't happen. I hope we get our shit together and it's able, whatever happens, this fall is able to happen for Phish and every other band. And I'm just thinking positively. I think it's going to happen.
Well, from your lips to Ja ears, like the Rastas say. And yeah, man.
How about you?
The same as you.
Okay.
I feel the same as you with regards to we can't survive another shutdown. We're not even sure if we really survived the first one yet.
Right.
So I'm not sure where I'm at on indoor shows. To be honest, I made an exception. I've been to one indoor show. It was the Lettuce after show. Lettuce is one of the few bands I actually love even more than Fish. And I had a very private area with my fiance with lots of space. And had that not been the case, I might not have stuck around. I'm just not sure. You know, I got the vax. I also don't have children. I have similar concerns as you in general. Just, you know, I wanted to backtrack and even ask you, like, I was really conscious of the mask, not mask, like we masked up. I'm here with my mom who's, 79 years old, and she came to one show, and I'm staying here for a time. So it was like, I'm going to mask up. I mean, I'm going to take a test tomorrow too. That said, if it wasn't an AC, I didn't do any of the other shows. It was just like in my backyard where I grew up, the beach I learned to surf on with my hometown homies. Like, we had the Fish tickets by mail last summer and held on to them hoping this would happen. And we did it, and jaw willing, we were going to test negative and turn the page. But there was so much just anxiety and apprehension just to do this and on a beach. And maybe I'm allowing fear to play too much of a role. I'm just not sure. I sure as shit want to be there. But if you're asking me today, I really don't know, man. They canceled Jazz Fest, which actually frees up the whole West Coast for me. Right. In a perfect world, I'm turning back the clock to summer 98.
Sure.
But who knows? We'll check in with me in about 6 weeks. I might have a better idea.
Sounds good.
But, dude, this was great, man. We should do it again down the road. There's always some cool shit to talk about. Your voice is one that's so treasured and valued in this community on so many levels. And I just love chopping it up with me, and I had a great time.
The feeling is mutual. Thanks for having me on.
Right on, brother. Well, that was awesome. Chatting it up with the one and only Scotty B. Scott Bernstein from JamBase.com. Check him out. YEMblog on Twitter, at YEMblog. Just an insightful follow. A lot of hashtag geekery. Just deep pulls on Fish stuff. And then, of course, the way Twitter works, you'll get steered into all of Fish Twitter and can... there's a number of people who do what he does, or a version of it, on Fish Twitter. And it's interesting in this age to see people freely discuss the band, not unlike they did in rec.music.fish, whatever that was, 25 plus years ago, the original shit. And everything, the whole diaspora that's extrapolated from... Fish fans, or fanners, as we used to call them, the internet, connectivity, geekery, and, the search for new land. Copyright Lee Morgan. So, yeah, there it is. Scotty B giving us his take on Summer 21 thus far. And, he just keeps it real. He is a genuine, intentional, just really authentic dude. And gives you the skinny, which is like a box score with all the essentials. It gives you the YEMblog, which are nuanced takes, some of them hot, some of them just, on the money, not controversial. But most of all, he just gives you an insightful reading of what we're getting from the Fish from Vermont. So I want to say thank you to Scotty B. I hope to have him back again. I'd love to really retrace his whole journey. It's so unique, and it's not unlike my own, but it's also markedly different. And, I was with JamBase for 14 years, and then when I got out of incarceration, Kunj and Sarah from Live for Live Music invited me to join their team, and I never looked back. But we had a brief crossover for like 2 years when Scotty was running the show at JamBase and I was still writing for them. And he published my first Burning Man article, which was like a new chapter for me as a journalist. And obviously Burning Man is certainly not JamBase's target demo and vice versa. But there is a little bit of crossover in the Venn diagram, more than you would think. And Scotty B had the vision to say, you know what, dude, I'll run it. And he didn't just run an article, man. I went on and on, like I always do, about, you know, my whole cherry popping Burning Man experience. And it was so like wide-eyed and slack-jawed, and also really passionate. And he ran it, and that opened so many doors for me, not the least of which was like Random Rab and Symbiosis and Lightning in a Bottle. And that Burning Man article just was kind of like a planting my flag in a lot of ways as a writer and a storyteller. And I got to hand it to Scott Bernstein on that. He green-lighted that shit and gave me the easel. And, you know, look at what he's done with the site in the interim almost decade now, because that was summer 2013. But I digress. I just wanted to show love to Scotty B and thank him for coming on the show, and we should have him back. But moving on to another topic, before I speak about my own thoughts and feelings, troubling developments in the fish community with regards to toxic masculinity and sexual behaviors, predatory behaviors, assault in some cases. I came across a post about another post written from an anonymous woman's perspective. I'm just going to read verbatim the post. It speaks for itself. The prevalence of this type of behavior is more present than any of us believe. There's been a lot of big takedowns in like electronic music with the bass nectar, or in the spiritual music scene with Nako, or EDM also with Thriftworks. I mean, a number of people and many more, and even more have been accused, and it sucks, and it's obviously a new dawn, a new day, and it's got to be called out and spoken about. And that's what this is about. That's what Groove Safe is about, which is an organization that's working towards making safer fish shows and festivals in the jam scene, and just the jam scene in general, a safer and more comfortable space for women. All that to say, and I quote from this post, quote, "I just read a post in a female-only fish fan group that I'm in about incidents of unwanted touching and groping at summer tour shows. A post that generated an additional 50-plus comments of other horrifying examples of sexually predatory behavior from men in the fish scene. It's horrifying. And the saddest fact of all is that if you've seen as many shows as me, that all of those things have probably happened to you. I've been touched, groped, forcibly kissed against my will, held, leered at, stared at, had unauthorized pictures and videos taken of me, had horrible things said to me, stared at for not only an entire song, but multiple songs by the same man, had men masturbate over their pants while watching me, been grabbed while walking, and harassed. In Hershey, we literally screamed for help while the men all around us stood there with their hands in their pockets and tried not to look. It's only getting worse, in my opinion. I said something sad to myself the other day, that as I get older, this will stop happening to me, that I'll be, quote, too old, unquote, to be sexually assaulted at a fish show. Sadly, I don't think this is something you age out of. And the fact that I'm even thinking this is the saddest thing of all. I know Groove Safe is doing the heavy lifting to amplify the message of having a safe show for everyone, but I'm sending a direct message to all the men who are fans and friends and also like fish. Please help us, all caps. Please don't stand there and let this happen. There are more of you than them, parentheses, the creeps. More of us than the creeps. And we just need you to stand up for us. If you see a woman acting like she's uncomfortable or scared, please ask her if she needs help, all caps. And if you're friends with any of these creeps, please put them in their place. It's not cool, it never was cool, and your drug and alcohol use is no excuse for this kind of behavior. End quote, close quote. Thank you, sister, whomever wrote that horrifying yet ultimately necessary missive. It made many of us furious to read. I just don't get it. Who goes to a fucking fish show for that shit? I mean, you shouldn't do that shit anywhere, but I don't understand somebody bringing that energy to that space, that behavior to that space. But of course, it's mostly dudes and mostly white dudes, and it goes without saying, you know, there's a sense of entitlement, and the rules don't apply, and why would the fish scene be exempt from such a thing? And as I wrote earlier this week, quote, just because the band is on fire and we're feeling feelings we forgot does not mean we are going to stand for this shit, look away, or tacitly allow it to continue. What so freaking ever. The fish community is far from immune to this kind of predatory behavior. In fact, it's more prevalent than anyone realizes. Yes, the good folks at Groove Safe are indeed on the case. Nonetheless, on average, fish shows are roughly 73% dudes. It's up to us to regulate this whenever we see it, however we can, on site. This shit's beyond deplorable and has no place. So reading this thread really snapped me out of my post-fish bliss with a quickness. A lot of fans are in denial of toxic masculinity, and it shows. Do better, do something. So yeah, before I get into my own fairy tale-ish take on the fish from Vermont, I felt it imperative and necessary to amplify this message and these terrible tales of egregious behavior. Come on, dudes. It's fucking embarrassing and criminal and just disgusting. I'm going to let this ride out for a second, and I'll be back in a moment with a few more words about the fish from Vermont before we hear from our next special guest. Yes, indeedy. Now that we got that PSA out of the way, I wanted to just read a little something that I scribbled in the aftermath of Atlantic City. They carry news that must get through to build a dream for me and you. I'd like to say something profound about this past weekend in Atlantic City, but I'm not exactly sure what, nor where to start. But I certainly feel it deeply and strongly, somewhere within my heart. Once upon a time, in what feels like a lifetime ago, the fish from Vermont were my whole universe. My entire calendar and social circle was predicated on the band and their unrivaled, exuberant live experience over and over and over again. Tour was everything, and often the only thing, until it wasn't. Even though I still saw shows from time to time and regularly engaged in conversations relative to the band, since I moved to California in 2013, I'd lost the fever for the flavor in a major way. It would ebb and flow, but the passion I once wielded and the fire that burned within me had faded considerably. I just took all that energy and attention that I formerly put into the fish and injected it into other artists, scenes, and adventures. Lettuce, D'Angelo, Jazz Fest, Burning Man, West Coast festival culture, eventually into my writing, podcast, and ultimately partnership. Yet I've never missed the fish from Vermont in the city by the Atlantic, nor has my mom for that matter. And with Alicia in tow, I wasn't about to let that streak come to an end, nor miss this golden opportunity to see the band in our beach backyard with my nearest, furthest, oldest, and dearest. We hit on fish tickets by mail back in 2020, and we held on to those ducats in hopes this summer would come to fruition. And yes, indeedy, it sure did. Of course, the Delta threw us a variety of curveballs, and the long weekend we dreamt of for a year plus was colored by concerns and anxieties, precautions and premonitions associated with recent spikes in cases and the resulting paranoia, fear, apprehension, and sadly, extreme division among my communities on both coasts. A bunch of friends freaked out and bailed in the week or so leading up to AC. Others got the bug on Fish Tour. And we ended up outright missing dozens more while we were down there at the shore. As phones hardly worked on the beach and the days and nights flew by before we knew it, it felt like the whole shebang was over in a blistering blink of an eye. I'm super bummed to have missed a number of peeps I was longing to connect with for many moons, but I am buoyed by the smiles and vibes from those we did, because oh, how we missed thee. You know who you is. And then there were the shows. What can I say? I have no complaints whatsoever. Back in the days, I was somewhat of a harsh critic who set the bar pretty high for these boys, and more often than not, they delivered. During the majority of 3.0, I turned into a card-carrying, jaded vet. Admittedly, I have not been as attentive nor passionate, and stopped prioritizing getting to multi-show runs long ago. Though it certainly could be me, I simply haven't exactly felt the same way about their performances in general, for the most part, in some time, and had in essence turned the proverbial page in numerous ways. For what it's worth, I hadn't really walked out of a Fish show with my head in the clouds and my heart in my hands since December 30th, 2012 at MSG in NYC. Somewhere within me it unexpectedly shifted during the pandemic, likely to an unforeseen, unpredictable elixir. Lots of time on my hands, keys to the Wayback Machine, a text thread with the hometown homies, the dinner and a movie series, those goddamn beacon jams, and a heightened propensity for the feels. The byproduct of these combined elements was that the fever for the flavor returned with gusto, and shockingly persuaded my soul to reignite. At some point, my fiancée Alicia, who I've been lucky to catch half a dozen shows with over the past few years, including my 200th, she remarked she'd never seen me so plugged into the Fish thing, so emotionally invested, the light growing brighter by the day. Here we were, streaming every night, guessing the songs on Twitter, breaking down the jam tendencies and new happenings. And then tuning in the next night once again. Rinse, repeat. Even planning our evenings around viewing the streams and then nerding out on what we heard until our heads hit the pillow. It was a side of me she was not exactly familiar with. Usually when I am stomping around the living room during a live stream with my hands on my head and my jaw agape, screaming, "Holy fuck!" to no one in particular, there's a different band on the screen, but let us get to them a little bit later. In light of what we've all collectively and individually lived through during this confounding, divisive, unprecedented time in our lives, the opportunity to attend the Fish shows in Atlantic City with Alicia, and for one show, my mom, was such a gift, such a joy, such a blessing, one that is not lost on me, whatsoever. I give thanks. And I'm on the record. Saturday night in AC was my favorite show since that penultimate night of 2012 at the Garden. Yet all 3 nights in AC kind of felt like one big show. Now, do I have opinions and takes on these particular performances? Sure I do. But it doesn't matter. I didn't come at this experience with a critical ear nor a writer's pen, so there will be no show reviews this time around. I really just surrendered to the flow and in the moment, without any sort of analysis to cloud nor color the concerts. I will say one final thing though. 3 nights and 6 sets of The Fish was positively glorious. This summer tour has proven they are creatively juiced, tremendously inspired, and making music as vibrant and ambitious as ever. Some of their Type 2 jams this summer and a few sets front to back have been nothing short of astonishing. And I must acknowledge, it feels fucking incredible to be dialed into La Cosa Nostra once again. However, let us, not even for a second, get it twisted, fam. The best music I heard, the sickest dance sesh we had, and really the finest 2 hours of the entire weekend in the city on the Atlantic, took place from 1 to 3 a.m. on Saturday night at Soundwaves in the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. And if I'm being honest, for me, it wasn't even close. But live music is not a competition, because around here, everybody wins. I hear the dogs of doom are howling more. And there you have it, fam. That was a little reflection on how I'm feeling in the aftermath of Atlantic City. I've been surfing for a few days here in Margate in the shadow of the mighty Lucy the Elephant, reconnecting with my youth, remembering who the fuck I am. And of course, the Fish from Vermont have a big part of that. And another major player, major factor in my roots and in my coming of age and in my life for, going on 30 plus years now. If I really think about it, like 33 years, is my boy J.A., Jason Abrams. He was on some of the early episodes of the Up for Life podcast, often to talk about the Fish. But he actually came through and stayed at my mom's crib with me and Alicia for this AC run, and we had a lot to talk about. So we decided to put it down for a podcast. So I thought it'd be a sweet complimentary commentary with Scotty B, the all-everything source, and then my man J.A., who is a noted Delaware Valley fish historian, but also just an almanac of pop culture, huge Guns N' Roses fan, huge just music encyclopedia across genres and generations. And we met at a Kiss concert in the Press Box at the Philadelphia Spectrum in 1990. Kiss Hot in the Shade tour. Little Caesar and Slaughter opened. So we're huge jam band fans, huge Fish fans, huge glam band fans, and metal, and pro wrestling. And Jason, as much as he knows about Fish and the Stones and Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses, he knows about pro wrestling. He's a in-ring announcer and a ringside announcer, and also a pro wrestling historian. So he happens to be one of my best friends in the whole world, and one of the best guys I know, and just a tremendous human being. You can check him out, Rock and Wrestling Connection. It's a podcast and also a TikTok channel where he's got just really sweet content on both sides of the rock and wrestling fence. I was on his pod a few months ago talking about bad guys in rock and bad guys in the ring. But Jason, J.A., the one and only, the icon under 40, he's one of the good guys. A baby face if there ever was. So with that, we'll hear a little bit more of this diabolical jam. And then J.A. on Up for Life podcast, episode 48. We don't often talk fish on the Up for Life podcast, but gotta admit, I'm a longtime and hardcore fish fan, and really have enjoyed listening to a variety of podcasts oriented around the fish from Vermont. Lately, be it on Osiris or the Big Cypress podcast, and I was just waiting for an opportunity to do something fish-oriented, fish content. And what do you know? Happened to be coming to you live and direct from Fishtown neighborhood in Philadelphia, PA, on the back end of 3 nights of the Fish from Vermont on the Atlantic City beach, where I spent many summers of my youth along with dear friends of mine growing up, because I'm from this area. All that to say, I have the distinct honor and pleasure and privilege of sharing the airwaves with one of my oldest and dearest friends, Jason Abrams, of the Jason Abrams Show, of the Rock and Wrestling Connection podcast, accomplished Delaware Valley Fishtorian, also an almanac of all things pro wrestling. And again,
Which was proven once again this weekend on the AC Boardwalk.
yeah, the clashing of the worlds. Jason here was able to answer a pretty obscure wrestling trivia question on demand, basically. So it's pretty amazing. But, Jason's been on the Up for Life podcast before, but not necessarily quite like this. We're just going to sit around and shoot the shit about the fish for a little while. So welcome.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me as always. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Yeah, and we had a weekend full of chats and full of hangs and walks on the beach and chopping up set lists and talking about cat hoodies.
You make it sound so romantic.
It felt romantic, it was, it was great to have you around, and it was great to see a bunch of the old gang.
It was great to stay at your place. It was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Wouldn't have it any other way. But obviously, it was just AC for me, 3 nights. Brought my mom on Sunday. It was her first time seeing fish since they last visited Atlantic City in 2012, which feels like a lifetime ago.
2 lifetimes ago.
Right. And she was there for the 2010 when they played Wingsuit on Halloween. She, I believe, went on the 29th that year. So she's 3 for 3 in AC, which we are as well.
I think, they've played AC 4 times. They've played AC Bader Field.
Right.
They played Wingsuit.
Right.
They played Little Feet.
Right.
And they also played this time on the beach.
Correct.
Well,
wow, I wonder if she's 4 for 4. I should ask her. I can't recall. You know,
I'm Delaware Valley noted fish story,
right.
So I know
Yeah,
these
yeah,
things.
you know these things. Yeah, and that's why you're on the show, and that's why I consult you for, the nerd stuff. And I, it goes without saying that those years, those early 3.0 years, might have been pretty clear for our Jedi hero, Trey, but can't say the same for me. So I'm not surprised I actually completely forgot one of those AC stops, because I went to all 4, and I believe my mom probably did as well. Can't imagine that we ever stayed at her place in Margate and she didn't come along to a show. But
yeah, Little Feet. I remember walking into the venue, and some girl was handed the fish bill in front of me, and she goes, "Little Feet, I have little feet. This is going to be great."
Oh, that's funny.
I was ready to go.
Yeah, those were some great shows. These were some great shows. And before we get into the minutia of the performances and even talking about the venue, let's talk a little bit about our histories with the fish, because we both started seeing music together as far back as 5th grade. Kiss on the Hot in the Shade tour. We both seen thousands of concerts. Literally, you were kind enough to hook me up a number of times. You've worked at a number of venues over the years. So it's not like you're just a fish fan or just a music fan. You're a music industry lifer. Your pops was in the industry here in Philly. His name rings out. And your brother's about to be inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame.
Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame. This coming
Mark Abrams, ladies and
this
gentlemen.
Sunday. He's got MarkAbramsBoxing.com. Might as well give that a quick plug.
Yeah, of course.
He owns 15rounds.com, which is a very popular boxing website. And yeah, he's going to be going into the Atlantic City. I started talking about him. That'll be 25 minutes. So we'll just leave it at he's going in with the Courageous Award, as he deserves.
As he does. And all that to say that you've been in entertainment in variety of capacities for your whole life. And it's funny because, like, you know, you've always been a hardcore music historian, but I feel like you were lukewarm on Phish until you really caught the bug. Take me back. You saw a couple shows, but it wasn't until years later that you really got the fever for the flavor.
I mean, I think it was just the same as anyone. I saw a show or two and then got into it a little bit more as it progressed.
What changed? What evolved for you where you're like, I need more of this?
I like, well, first of all, I just like good music. So, I mean, I go to 3 to 4 concerts a week anyway, when, you know, pre-COVID or, you know, what have you. But, so I would always go see whatever's in town. And even, like, if I'm into the band, non-jam band related, I would go to multiple other cities to see some of my favorite bands. Springsteen, Guns N' Roses, the Rolling Stones. So it wouldn't just go to like the Philly show. So it was easy for me to latch on to what they were doing. I love the set list change. I love the Grateful Dead. I love there's other aspects about Phish, like collecting posters. I like merch, you know, like, so it's like I'm like a natural fit.
Yeah.
They're like really selling to me.
Indeed. Yeah. You are kind of like the perfect, you know,
Yeah.
demographic or fan for them because you touch all the boxes. But, you know, like, you've never been a big psychedelics guy. You've never been, like, crazy, like, intoxicated guy. You've also never really been, like, super nerdy about, like, stats and Phish lore. But yet, you're probably the most dedicated fan of my inner circle.
Maybe it's because I didn't do the psychedelics. I remember I retained it all.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, you proved it a few minutes ago by pulling out the stats from AC. And I think, you know, you've been somebody that, as I kind of touch and go with Phish, you know, they were my whole life, or, you know, my first 100 shows or so, like, nothing else mattered. And then, you know, it's been touch and go during 3.0 for me for the most part. But this summer, and I think, you know, this is a good way to kind of segue into the discussion, I found myself hooked long before I got to go to AC, you know, streaming, talking on Twitter, talking online, reading reviews. Something happened during the pandemic. I think it was related to the Beacon Jams and the absence of live music and sort of reflecting on all that we've had and all that we've been blessed to experience, and then having the rug pulled out. It was, you know, impossible not to just marinate on the, you know, glory days of yore. So I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about the community, maybe like the state of the Phish Union, if you will, not necessarily relative to COVID, but just, I don't know if this is a 4.0 era, whatever you want to call it, this summer.
Everything's related to COVID. After a 2-year hiatus from life, it doesn't matter if it's music, sports, a desk job. I mean, you just can't shake it.
Right.
So therefore, it almost feels like, yeah, this is a 4.0. There's after COVID is definitely a vibe.
Right. And
Not saying COVID's over.
right. And but we're not saying it's over. Yeah. And this is not really a discussion of that nature, but like you said, you can't get around, it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Did you notice any kind of tangible difference at the shows, like a community vibe? And you don't have to be rosy red glasses. If you didn't feel it, I'd like to hear it. I'm curious if you sensed any sort of like togetherness or anything that was different, say, from 2019.
Well, I didn't have to pass joints. That was good. No, but you know what? So I went and saw a couple. I saw Guns N' Roses
First, right.
a few days before I saw Phish. I saw Guns N' Roses in Hershey Park Stadium where they kicked off their tour, and then I saw another Guns N' Roses show in MetLife Stadium, and then I saw Phish in Hershey Park, then 3 Phish shows in Atlantic City. That being said, I feel like I really, the Guns N' Roses, it was a sold out show. There was like 40 something thousand people there. There was a vibe, just like, the weather was great. So, yeah, it definitely, like, you knew in the back of your head, like, wow, this is the first time I'm at a big concert. There was very few masks, but some masks. But I think people were just like, it was like, back to norm. Like, beer line was long as can be. I think by the time I got to the Fish concert, same thing. Like, half of that crowd or 35% of that crowd has already been to a few shows on that tour. Mm-hmm. So they were kind of like, already in their element. So it's like riding a bike as a fan.
Yeah, I guess it is. For me, it didn't feel like riding a bike. I took a little time to get acclimated. I seen a couple shows also before the Fish in AC, but not other Fish shows. So I didn't go to Hershey, although, I went to Hershey in 96 and then again in 2000.
Ditto.
Did you?
2009.
I didn't go in 2009. Did you get a sense? Was there any sort of historical vibe? I know they played some songs that they had played at their previous shows there, but Hershey holds a little bit of Fish lore, right? Like it has a little bit of.
They've played 3 different venues, I think, in Hershey.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you think of this venue relative to like space and your ability?
I said to my friend who I went to the show with, if you were any hesitancy of, COVID, but you really had that Fish bug and wanted to go, Hershey would have been the perfect stop on the tour to go to because the place holds like 50-something thousand. It's an old football stadium built in like the 1930s, so it's a huge football stadium. I mean, and they probably only put like 17,000 people in there on a Tuesday, Wednesday. The place they were going to originally play held 11,000. Matt, I go to other venues and the Fish lore pops up. Not as much for me with Hershey.
Okay. Yeah, that's a straight take. I appreciate that. Now let me ask you this, because there's the whole the fans show up, they come into your town, they're going to party down, right?
Oh yeah. So,
what was that like? Now, whether it's shakedown or at the hotels or whatever, when Fish came to Hershey, was there that take over the town vibe, or did you not really know what was up until the show?
There wasn't people weren't hesitancy on pregame, but there wasn't maybe as communal as before.
Right.
Maybe not as many people walking around. Maybe
shakedown going on.
I didn't really we got there, we went in,
right.
So I didn't super partake, but we had they parked. It was so funny. Once again, here you go, great example. I was saying this to my buddy on the way up. Guns N' Roses, 40-something thousand people, right? Fish, 20,000 people. Guns N' Roses, they let you park right in the venue, right in the venue parking lot. Mm-hmm. For Fish, they put us on some dude's farm that they called up the day before. We need some space. We got some dirty filthies coming to town. It was so embarrassing.
Oh,
I said to Joe, I was like, are you kidding me? This is crazy. We literally drove by where I parked for Guns N' Roses, or they let people park, and it was half empty. There's just you could run around and do cartwheels in the parking lot and spots. But no way would they let the Fish fans park there.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what they were
reputation
expecting.
precedes them. Or maybe they just needed all the space for Guns because there's so many more cars, so many more
No. They did not let these people near their parking spots that might have had people that were going into Hershey Park. Okay. They were like, these people.
I see what you're saying. They wanted to keep the...
Oh, my God. It was so embarrassing. They might as well park. I might as well got out of the car in Philly and walked.
Yeah, it's 30-plus years drug banned. Reputation precedes them.
It was terrible.
Okay, but and what was your take on the performances?
Oh, they're on fire right now. These guys
specifically Hershey though.
These guys were itching to play. It was a great show. They played a lot of songs I love. 2 of my favorites, Lizards and Joy.
Was that night one?
I went night one only.
Okay.
They opened the show with First Tube, which is real easy to get the crowd going.
Yeah, cheap pop.
Definitely a cheap pop. Trey's, you know, he stands out in front of his mic, you know, everyone's excited. He really gets the pit going, you know.
Yeah, what do you think of First Tube? More, like, I know it's neither of our favorite songs, but, like, is it more effective in the opener slot or, like, how we played it in AC deep in the second set?
Those Marks and Chompers will eat it up whenever he throws it out.
Okay, and you love Lizards.
Lizards and Joy, two of my all-time favorite Fish tunes. So it was, if you get something like that in one show, it's like, wow.
Right.
Death Don't Hurt Very Long is probably my favorite of all the like newer songs.
Stuff.
That
or
was
just in general.
Yeah, like it's an incredible song.
It's a great song.
It's got like this like rebellish Johnny Cash vibe to it, but you know it's still Fish and it rocks.
It has like a ZZ Top thing to it.
ZZ Top, yeah, it's great.
But when you talk about that stuff, like, okay, those are 3 songs. Joy is so different than the Lizards. I mean, they're 20 years apart. The Lizards is some fantasy land game hen shit. Joy is just such a simple, beautiful, folky sentiment. And then Death Don't Hurt Very Long is like a arena rock bombast. And it's the same band and the same fan, and you love these songs. And
I mean,
couldn't
look,
be more
we got
different.
a couple thousand records. You know, we can go listen to Paul Abdul or we can go listen to Suicidal Tendencies. What do you want to do?
That's why you're my boy, man.
So,
that's
like, you know,
range right there.
So, whatever, you know, it's a vibe, it's a feeling. You know, and that's, you know, songs that I particularly like. But I like them all. There's not one bad song in the bunch.
It's a good example that
that's
debatable.
But those were two more of my top tiers.
Because, like, you know, people didn't love Hershey, you know.
Those people are crazy.
Right. Well, you know, it's a different show that falls on different ears.
Second set had a sick No Man's Land opener with
big jam.
The jam. If you know, it was a big jam. I would have liked the jam to have been later in the set, maybe hoping that then another big jam would be like, you know, like I feel it's, I don't know, but you know, it's they know what they're doing.
Right, it's their music to play.
Yeah, but it was a great jam, and then Soul Planet. I love Soul Planet.
You do?
Yeah, it's a good tune.
I'm not a fan.
Okay.
It feels pedantic to me, but it has some jams sometimes.
And I See You, great standard, then the Joy, Golden Age.
Yeah. Great cover.
Huge tune.
So you were pleased. I think it's a good example of, like, you know, some people see a bunch of shows and then, you know, they get more critical. This was your first show back. You were just blissed out getting the songs you wanted to hear. You know, for me, I've been paying attention all summer.
Just the vibe, too.
Right.
And being, you know.
Let's talk about the vibe. What was the vibe in Hershey?
It was a great vibe. I mean, the fans never miss a beat there. As a matter of fact, during the second set, I'm hanging out, and there's like these, you know, 2 cute girls. One who was like really having a good time, and then another taller friend of hers. They're both adorable. And like, you know me, I'm kind of a shy guy, so like, I don't know, I get like, you know, I get intimidated. A cute girl might say hi to me. I feel like she's gonna mug me or something. I have terrible reactions. So she's like, whatever, and then, you know, I was like, I'm so stupid. I should probably dance with this girl. But you know what? Then 3 songs later, I look over. She's in her cocktail dress on the ground doing the worm like she's Scotty Too Hottie.
Oh, my God. Right there on the floor?
Oh, it's fascinating. Tremendous.
That's dedication, and especially in this day and age. And
now I really wish I would have danced with her.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone gets down and does the worm mid-second set. But that just shows you, you know, the level of joy and elation that fans are feeling.
It's the best fan. I love saying it's the best fan. But there are so many great fan bases. But it's a great fan base. I feel like it's an incredible fan base. There's just so much going on. The girl did the worm.
I know, amazing.
In a cocktail dress. I saw Whitney Houston in a similar cocktail dress. Girl's doing the worm.
Now let's talk about AC. Let's talk a little bit about
3 nights,
AC.
Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Yeah. So this was like an event. I wanted to ask if to you, did it musically, culturally, did it feel like a festival?
It had a festival vibe to the point the beach was so big.
Yeah.
That it gave people an opportunity to like stake ground, have a little spot for them and their friends. It was a big show. I mean, you could, they told us, you know, they did 50,000 people for some of the previous concerts before
like Warped Tour and stuff.
Yeah, before the COVID era. Maroon 5 played there. Pink played there. DMX, God rest his soul, played there. The Rough Riders reunion tour, Big
Wow.
Night, whatever that was going around.
Could you imagine that on that beach? Holy
It
shit.
must have been a fucking night.
Thousands of people just barking.
Yeah, I would love to have been there. I saw that when it first came around, working at the Sony Blockbuster Entertainment Center. But that was like, the Rough Riders tour.
Yeah. When it wasn't a reunion, it was
it was like
the real thing.
They were in their 20s and late 20s, whatever. Eve, I guess, was the biggest deal at that point.
Right. Yeah, Philadelphia's own.
Yeah.
So relative to the beach, because there's been discussion on Twitter, and I've been reading reviews of different folks, and so for me, the beach was amazing. I grew up on this beach right down the beach in Margate, 2 miles or so for those of you less initiated. Spent all my summers there learning to surf, going to camp, playing on the beach, ice cream, man.
So this beach has an elephant.
Oh yeah, we'll get to Lucy. I'm just saying. So I grew up down there, and so I have a very strong affinity for the region, for the beach, for the history of Atlantic City, of Absecon Island. And of course, Lucy the elephant. Now, we didn't know about the poster.
No.
The night before they released it on Friday morning, so Thursday night, when we got down there, I took my fiance Alicia and my buddy KOD and showed them Lucy just because it was was Andres the 8th wonder of the world? So Lucy's probably the 9th wonder.
Well, China's
the 9th. All right, I digress. Anyway, we went down to Lucy, took a couple pictures, told them some stories about, playing around there in my youth. And then the next morning, they reveal the posters, and one of them has an image of Lucy with the band at the top, reminiscent of kind of like the It Fest.
I don't think the band.
No, they are.
Oh,
Look, you got to go up real close. There's 4 heads.
Okay, I'll look at it.
And it's reminiscent of the Tower Jam.
It's funny because I have one, and I didn't. But I put it in my tube right away. But I'll look at it.
Yeah, so the band's at the top, but that's not the point. I'm getting at the fact that I loved the idea of doing the event on the beach in AC in the summer. We hit on the mail orders in 2020. COVID happened, doesn't happen. If it was any other band anywhere else, I'm not doing it for obvious reasons. I had to travel from California. It's a whole lot. However, I wasn't going to miss Fish on the beach in AC for 3 nights, and it was an incredible experience just to go back where it all began for me, see all the kids I grew up with, plus a million other barefoot friends, thousands of them, from all walks of my life. And then, of course, the shows. However, there were complaints, if you will, about the sort of infrastructure and logistics of Fish on the beach. So you said it was really big. Obviously, there were delay towers every 100 yards. It was 10 city blocks. There were huge floodlights on at all times. Did you, yes or no question, love or not AC Beach as a venue?
It was pretty amazing. As a venue. You got your feet in the beach, in the sand,
in the ocean,
and you can go into the ocean. I was surprised how liberal they were with letting people run around, but they had a bunch of lifeguards on, and
huge floodlights, which were kind of a rough on the eyes. I mean, I have shades.
Yeah, but they had those throughout the venue. It wasn't just I don't think it was for the beach. I don't even think the floodlights even reach the ocean, really.
They were pretty bright on the ocean side, but I'm just saying that was one of the main complaints. Like, hey, let's watch it down by the water. Oh, the floodlights are really bright. Certain places, if you stood between A, B, and C, they were pretty bad. But then there was a floodlight over on the other side.
The biggest complaint I had was the trash cans. There was no trash cans. That's everything else was fine. They did a pretty good job for what you're dealing with. It's just a huge beach. But once again, so it's a beach. Not that we want to throw garbage out on any floor or structure or grass, but it's the beach. So they should have definitely had some more opportunities to throw your garbage.
There was trash everywhere.
I really don't hope that's an example of the fan base, because even in the food court where you had 12, or 15 food
vendors
lined up, there was not a trash can in front of any of them.
Right.
Come on. Who has, that might be illegal. It's unsanitary.
I wonder what that was.
Someone missed that one.
It was just way too few, and the ones they
Walt
had
Disney
were too
would
small.
not have been happy.
No, of course not. But I was disappointed in the garbage that was left around. we did a few, pickups at the end of each night, but it was,
Yeah, and
doesn't even put a dent into
I'm
it.
the first one to blame the fans when the fans are wrong. For example, the nitrous after the show, which is like, I don't know if I can blame the fans. Like, these aren't necessarily fans that run in and do it, but whatever.
If people didn't buy it, they wouldn't show up.
The fans, whatever, But the fans, the balloons are crazy. I mean, they have pictures of some of the seagulls eating balloons.
It's
I mean,
disgusting.
It's sad. So I'll point it out when it's wrong, but the fans did not do anything wrong when it comes to leaving the garbage. Or, unfortunately, they were put in a bad scene. They were sold all this beer and food, and
They weren't set up
away.
for success with the garbage.
Yeah.
They didn't set them up for success. I have to agree, man. And, there's this whole West Coast leave no trace movement at festivals where you bring it in, you bring it out. That stuff doesn't really happen out here. I wish people would have been more attuned to the garbage stuff. But like you said, there just simply weren't enough receptacles. But at the end of every night, after having this blissed out night, dancing, friends, family, fish, lights come on, and there's garbage everywhere. It just kind of took a little bit of the happiness.
To the music.
Yeah, okay.
We dwelled enough on garbage. It's a lot of garbage.
What was your favorite night in AC?
Well, so back to your version of the festival vibe. I kind of like lumping it all together in a weird way.
One big show.
That does feel like that to me when it's all said and done. Of course, we had, I guess, 3 periods, so to speak, like a hockey game in this one.
Right.
As opposed to like 4 quarters at the Garden.
Yeah.
The middle night, maybe the Saturday night was maybe the if you were gonna bring a fan and be like, "Yo, this is Phish." I mean, this is what they do. They played a lot of their big songs, and they played great, which is the most important part.
I think the performances is what makes it great more than the songs, because we
course.
talked about Friday night being like a hits night, like it's big pop songs, big cheer songs and beloved songs. But then Sunday you got the 2 chestnuts in Yem and Fluff. I mean, the definitive like Phish anthems. Yet Saturday night for me was most special for a variety of reasons. Let's start at the top. Are you a slow llama guy?
No, but you mentioned that real quick, the 2 chestnuts, so to speak. Well, Friday night, second set opener, you get Tweezer, Bathtub Gin. So there you go.
Yeah.
Once again, 2 really big songs.
Right.
And I think it was like a 40-minute combo.
Yeah.
Back to Saturday night.
Well, you said to me at the end of Friday night, you're like, tonight was one of those nights where you got big songs, played well, but it was not anything we were going to say like tonight's version of whatever, Tweezer, Gin, you name it, was like an all-timer, but they were all great and competently played.
It was just,
I thought that Saturday night...
It was like setting the vibe almost. Back to that festival.
But traditionally, festival or 3 nights in the same city, traditionally, Saturday night is the sort of rock and roll concert.
Of course.
Right? That wasn't this one.
Well, I mean, Phish is a rock and roll band, and they delivered Phish.
Right, but you got, like, the Epic Slave and that,
No Quarter?
No Quarter, the Ghost. I mean, there were all these...
No Quarter's rock and roll.
Yeah, well, but that was the best No Quarter I can remember.
It was, Page was really, like, laying down a foundation on it.
Yeah, he was.
Like, and like, bringing it back,
One of the things I really loved about No Quarter, you were mentioning about Page, and obviously Page has been on some shit the whole summer, but I really thought that Trey was like super dialed with his guitar tone, which has been on point all summer, but if pay special attention to the No Quarter, he was just locked in a zone. Granted, they're not his own licks, but he was...
Well, even more so, you got to give it up to Jimmy Page. You don't want to be disrespectful.
Exactly. And I talked a little bit about this on social, but I wanted to say Saturday night was the night that really hooked me back to the Phish. I had said, like, I never really, like, lost myself in the music since 12/30/12. And I don't see as many shows as I used to, and not always paying as much attention, but for whatever reason, the stars aligned that night, and coming out the gates with Slow Llama, Tube, Destiny, even though maybe Destiny wasn't that well performed, just felt like, wow, this is my kind of first set. And you know, Yamar, 46 Days, Reba, Soul Shakedown Party, Split Open and Melt, Squirming Coil. The newest song of that bunch is 46 Days, 1998. So it's just like super old school. But then they start second set with Never Needed You Like This Before, the new Trey song from the Pandemic. A Big Drowned, which I thought was a gimme.
With the Dancing in the Dark teasers.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Our good friends at Fish.net missed that one.
Well, hopefully somebody will add it in after the fact.
Twitter.
Ghost is where I really shifted into overdrive dancing. Too short, criminally short, Sense and Subtle Sounds. Obviously, they played the intro the next night. But Chalk Dust, No Quarter, Slave. That window right there is primo Fish, and Slave is one of my tunes. And this particular Slave was everything that I seek out of the Fish experience in a nutshell.
Big Slave.
Big Slave. And then, of course, Susie, Life Beyond a Dream. And then the Twee Prize on Saturday, not
Slow
Sunday.
down the Susie to get the slot machine pop.
Right.
And if you listen to previous Vegas shows from before, he kind of just goes right into it like a normal Susie. But you can tell a lot more with Susie because Susie is so, like, it's always played very similar, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if he does anything, or if they do anything different with it, you kind of notice it as a keen listener, you know?
And you felt like they wanted us to really get set up for that slot machine.
Yeah, of course. But
Yeah.
he's a showman at this point.
Yeah, I just loved Saturday. They played songs that I loved really competently, if not outstanding and extraordinary. And for whatever reason, I was in the right space to receive.
It was a great show.
Yeah.
Show.
And then we talk a little bit about Sunday. We could, without getting all into the blow by blow.
Kick down for the fans that have been the whole tour.
Yeah. Big Sloth Kickdown. I love that song. Love any of the really obscure Gamehenge stuff. But let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Lucy?
The other elephant. I'm going to set it up. Big, historic tour. We didn't even talk about this because neither of us went, but some of the jams earlier in the tour, some of the best Fish I ever heard, like the Simple Jam, the Tweezer from Alpharetta. There were a couple others. A Blaze On, that was huge. Yes. It's not just the length, but was what's going on.
Of course.
And we got a version of that with Carini, a more compact version, but where they're just like going to outer space, doing the Type 2 thing, but with intention and with patience, telling a story. And that's really what hooked me this summer and really got me so amped and attuned for AC. All that to bring us to the encore race. So we get the Yem at the end of set one, which, by the way, I brought my mom on Sunday night, and for her to see the fans get a Yem and the elation and the, just pure joy that came over, 30,000 people. It was just cool for her to see and kind of give her an understanding of what the passion is all about. But then that's even turned up to 10 when you get a Fluffhead encore. A Fluffhead encore at the end of a historic tour with the COVID cloud over us and all that. I could have left it on the table, the number line. There's a lot of discussion going on, and I don't want to get all heated about it. But for me, I really felt like you could have just played the Fluffhead. Yeah, they wanted to play the number line.
Of course, more songs is better, I guess. But you know what? I got my own love-hate relationship with Numberline as is, and this has nothing to do with that. But almost as a respect to Fluffhead, this is the ultimate quintessential Fish song. Bang, thank you, good night.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's some threads on Twitter. Somebody had passed away, and their favorite song was Numberline, and they had spread their ashes that night. So those people were on the moon when they did the Numberline. Our good buddy Joe D really appreciated the Numberline.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of fans that loved it and wanted to hear it and are appreciative of it. And I'm not hating, but I feel like a standalone Fluff encore is the highest bar and the deepest bow.
Yeah, no, I thought it would have been, but it's fine. It didn't. But yeah, I was surprised by a second tune, even if no matter what it would have been.
Yeah.
Numberline or My Soul.
Fair enough. But and I'd be remiss if we didn't at least, have to touch on it a little bit, which was that, I was pretty terrified. I'm vaccinated. I wore a mask. You had a more laissez-faire attitude about it, but you obviously are vaccinated and, you're not. We have the same view of COVID and respect and fear and so forth, but you were able...
Well, fear might be
maybe not the fear.
Too
Okay.
far of a word.
Okay, I have the fear.
I fear 8 blocks down in my neighborhood.
That's a different kind of fear. But how did you feel in general going to shows? You went to Guns N' Roses and you went to Fish.
So I wore a mask on my way in until I got to a settled spot, and then whatever. I felt like I was in a comfortable zone. Sometimes I put it back on for situations that were necessary.
Right. And do you think that you were kind of the average fan? Do you think the average fan did less, did more?
Well, as the concert season was progressing for me, it seemed like more and more masks. There was, very few masks at Guns N' Roses Hershey. There was some more masks at Guns N' Roses North Jersey. Jersey, one of the better states in the COVID
numbers
score game, whatever it is. And then Hershey Fish, some masks. Hershey AC a little bit more masks than Hershey in AC.
Okay.
So it seemed like I saw, but you know what? There was also more people, but percentage wise, it seemed like I felt there was more masks. And we got a couple of different protocols, in that 72-hour range.
Yeah, we did. And there's been some changes, and they're going to be asking for vaccination status or testing and so forth. And it's already proved to be a little bit divisive in the community. I sure hope that we don't get bogged down in the culture wars in the Fish community.
Anyone who wants to sell their Vegas ticket, I'm all good. I'll take it.
Yep, you heard it here first. JA needs Vegas.
I could use 2, possibly a 3rd.
There you go. Well, we just hope that the shows go on safely with whatever precautions are necessary. I just want to see the community stick together. There's already so much division in this country.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Are we?
Yeah, the Fish community.
But are we? I'm asking you. Yeah. I'm not saying we're not.
No, I don't feel.
You feel good about it?
I feel that these kids, even if they're unvaccinated, they'll get whatever they need to do to get to the concert. They care more about Fish.
That's what concerns me. Whatever they need to do, that could be a fake COVID card or whatever.
Not everybody in the building is going to be vaccinated.
I know that. I mean, they can't be. A lot of people simply can't do it. Some people choose not to do it. This isn't a political show, and the vaccination shouldn't be political, but it's become that. I just don't want to see us get bogged down in the culture wars. I was a little bit surprised that Panic kind of was first with the whole change in protocols, and Fish kind of a little late to the party.
I think it's all dependent on the promoters and who you're working with and what your venues are. It's way bigger than the bands and what have you. Management.
Good point.
Yeah.
It is bigger than
Fish
the band.
is playing these venues that are humongous venues,
Right.
It's a whole different level.
What does your spidey sense tell you about the fall? Shows go on?
I hope so.
Well, we all hope so. But what do you feel?
I honestly, I have no idea. I mean, this is
uncharted territory.
Yeah, I hate to sound like I should make up something and give us some entertainment for the podcast.
No.
But who's to say what? There's just so many variations of what happened and continues to go on.
That's a valid point, and nobody knows what's going to happen, and of course you're not in the business of making predictions.
I think they can look at what just happened in the summer, and they came out and said Lollapalooza did not turn out to be a super spreading event. It's a lot different than when we were going to events unvaccinated, obviously there was very few of those type events. But, yeah, the numbers show it that there's going to be less transmission. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's a guarantee in life except death and death.
Yeah, not even taxes.
Yeah, just death.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret there were a number of cases on the tour. Hopefully, it ends up being a minuscule percentage. People get better, and we can,
Well, the one thing you can guarantee is change, or count on is change.
Of course, yeah, of course. Now, as I'm sitting here in your awesome apartment, looking at your amazing poster collection and wrestling memorabilia and a million fucking vinyl records, it makes me kind of want to shift gears for a second. We've talked a lot of Fish. We've talked COVID. We've talked venues. We kind of touched on GNR, but as you know, I'm a huge GNR fan my whole life. Seen him in concert a handful of times, but not nearly as much as you. And we talked about how much you love Fish because of the set list switching. And
it was so much more than
no,
just
I'm going to give the set list switching and
it's a hangnail of it, yeah.
And the community, the music, the story, the travel, the posters, all that. Okay, Guns N' Roses is a different beast entirely. They play pretty much the same show every night.
Same exact show
right?
every night. Same show at this point right now.
And you've seen the comeback Duff/Axl version of this band, what, maybe 10 times since 2016?
Probably like 8 or 9. Yeah, probably close to that.
So help me understand, because I've only seen the reunion tour once at the where the Giants play baseball in San Francisco. What keeps you coming back to GNR like you do Fish?
Well, Guns N' Roses is in my top 5. And my top 5 meaning like I have 5 favorite bands. Like probably like, I can't say one's better than the other. Be like,
I'm going to give them to you. Bruce, Stones, Fish,
Guns,
Bon Jovi.
Guns dead.
Dead over Bon Jovi.
Dead's like my all-time. Like,
okay, I know you love the Dead, but I could have sworn JBJ and Richie would be in
I'd
there.
say the Grateful Dead is probably the greatest American rock band of all time.
Oh, I would agree.
No,
yeah.
And Metallica might even be number 2, and they both happen to be from like the same neighborhood.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of weird.
San Francisco.
So it must be good in that water,
or the weed, or something.
Yeah.
What about Guns? What about Guns in 2021?
Well, Guns N' Roses is my band. Like I love Axl. I want to. It doesn't matter if he's singing with the hired Guns N' Roses members or if he's singing with his old pals. Who wrote Appetite. I love watching him sing. It's probably the same thing as people that used to go see Sinatra hundreds of times. And I love watching him perform. I grew up. I saw the whole story. Whether it was like his heyday when he became bougie and had the same guru as LaToya Jackson, and now he's like the elder statesman and shows up on time and puts on a great show. I mean,
gets political on Twitter.
He's just
how's he sound? How does Axl sound? Because that voice, it's a tough one.
So I think he could help himself by like he comes from this old school where he has to play like 2.5 hours is a slow show. Like he play close to 3 hours every night. I think he cuts the show down to 90 minutes to somewhere in the 90-minute 2-hour range. He can give you a stronger performance with his voice. He's 59 years old and nobody looks like and sings like they did in 1987.
Right. Especially his singing style, because it's rough on the vocal cords. And
so unique.
Violent.
Yeah.
It's violent.
Yeah, but I'm like, when I'm saying unique, like,
no one sounds like
yeah, and people are always going to be like, it wasn't,
right.
But, it also isn't, so.
I mean, I love Axl. It's been amazing to see his growth as a human, as like a figure in society and the culture. He was like, a heel, a bad guy for a long time. Even though we loved him, we couldn't necessarily agree with a lot of the stuff he said or did, but we loved him in spite of that.
But when you look back on it and then you really get a grasp of what happens, like, because like when you go from like Appetite to Use Your Illusion to you and I, it felt like eternity. But for him, it was actually just a couple years of his life in his early 20s. And, this guy went from, like, a very crazy childhood to one of the most recognizable people on the planet. Like, Michael Jackson competitive status at that time. So, once again, another guy who's had a crazy life. You don't know what it's like to be put under that microscope until you're there, and you don't know what's going to happen. And yeah, he definitely did some wacky and crazy things, but he learned how to deal with it. It took him time, but he's way awesome now.
I mean, There's only one GNR. There's only one Axl Rose.
It's the greatest record of all time, Appetite for Destruction. I don't know if you guys have ever heard it. Go purchase yourself a copy. I've gotten it about 13 times.
Yeah, I would say it's the greatest debut record.
It's the greatest record of all time.
What is the song that really, not so much on Appetite, but when you go see Guns N' Roses, what's their fluff head? November Rain?
Dead Horse. I mean...
Oh, really?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of a song that came back to the set list.
That's like a sloth, right? Dead Horse is like them doing fish playing
but
sloth.
yeah, no, definitely November Rain is like a huge tune. As a matter of fact, in New York, so we talk about how the set list doesn't change, but like if Axl does something just a little bit different, it's a huge deal in the Guns N' Roses community. So he starts, he gets his piano, they bring his piano to him. So he starts singing, You got what I need.
Oh, wow.
You say she's just a friend, and then he's just like laughing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Then bang, right into the beginning of November Rain, the piano, the blah, blah, blah. And then right before the breakdown, the do-do-do-do-do-do-do, he goes, you got what I need. And, that shows you that this is loose Axl Rose. He's having a great time. He's in New York City. And, paying what, as a fan at that point in the show, assuming that he's paying some kind of, respect.
Yeah.
And then bang, blah, 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 they finish November Rain, the huge finish, and then, like, back again. You got what I need. You say he's, and then, so it was just like, so you knew how, whatever. So obviously Axl's paying tribute to Biz Markie.
Right.
Now he goes into a story. Like, it's like, holy toady. I mean, okay, so
While
here
he's
you go.
sitting at the piano?
So, how about this? It's just as exciting to get a story from Axl Rose during a concert as it is to get the Mockingbird or the Harpua.
Wow.
Because it doesn't happen. And when it happens, he's either going to talk shit to a tech or we're going to get story like, I never hung out with Biz Markie, but one time I was in my limo or something, I forget exactly what he said, and he was walking by and he looked down at me and he goes, "Nice car, man." And he's like, I knew he knew. And so, like, just to hear Axl, because he's so, you just don't know too much about him. Like, you haven't heard, like, he doesn't do too many interviews. You never know who he hung with,
But they both blew up in that same late 80s time where hip hop was kind of just becoming like macro huge, and Biz Markie had that major song, and Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine, same time, so I'm sure that Axl looks at Biz Markie as sort of like a peer from the era.
And exactly what you just said, even though like he's wasn't playing stadiums or anything at the end of his career, Biz Markie rocket shipped into such an elite status of stardom that only a few people can really, sit at a table and talk to each other about. Biz might not have been there for a decade, but just being there for a year, not being able to walk around New York City without, just, it's such a different world that these people, blah, blah, blah,
existed.
Go through.
Yeah.
So nuts. And Biz was, right there.
And I mean, he could still, go anywhere and get recognized 10 times. Maybe not like 87. And honestly, I would say that more people can sing Just a Friend than maybe even Sweet Child of Mine.
That's what I'm saying. Like, a one-hit wonder, but he wasn't a one-hit wonder. It's totally not
right.
the
But
case.
he had one huge super mega hit.
I mean, like, people on Mars sing that song.
Right,
It's
exactly.
like insane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's cool that Axl...
And people on Mars are singing Child.
But that's cool that Axl, he's not too self-important to take a moment.
There's been, like, once again, like, anytime something that comes out about him, like, it's, like, huge news in the Guns N' Roses community. So I remember, like, reading things, like, during the Democracy era about some, like, new music that he was listening to. So he knows everything that's going. He's paying it, it seems like he knows what's going on in the music scene.
There's more crossover between the Fish and Guns thing than you would think. Obviously, Christy from Surrender to the Flow, huge Guns fan, flew right to Dick's. This dude on Twitter, fish guy on Twitter, Chopaganda, also tweeting about Guns right after Fish. So, you know, you're not alone, Jason.
Well, anyone who pays attention to my TikTok, which I'm starting to get some pretty good celebrity status. I don't want to toot my own horn.
Where can people find you on
TikTok? I'm the Rock and Wrestling Connection Pod, I think, or Rock and Wrestling Connection Podcast, but I'm pretty sure it's Rock and Wrestling Connection Pod. Anywho, I told a story about the Guns N' Roses, how they just played this song called Absurd for the first time since 2004, but in 2004 it was called Silkworms and evolved into this new version of Absurd, like Black Eyed Katie from Fish, you know, which turned into the Mama Dance.
Yeah.
So, therefore, you know, I made that little comparison on my TikTok.
It's a legitimate parallel.
Yeah.
They were once one song evolved into another.
Yeah, and now it's going to be a version
I like
stick with you.
The lyric-less Black Eyed Katie, a little more than MoMA. What do you like better, Silkworms or Absurd?
Well, Slash is on Absurd, so we got to give...
Was Bucket on Silkworms? Who knows?
Yeah, I'll have to, you know, it's a demo. It's not even,
right.
You know, we never got the original cut.
Right.
There's only 14 guitar players on that record, and that's not an exaggeration.
That's one last thing I want to ask you about. Slash and Duff playing on the Chinese Democracy tunes.
Duff McKagan crushes that bass. I mean, he's such a great player. It's so amazing to hear someone play a bass note that you've heard him play for 30 years and still make it sound fresh. Like It's like you've heard it the first time. He's an incredible player, and Slash is the GOAT. I mean, it's beyond.
That's what all the word is about this tour, is that Slash is on some shit.
I said the first night we saw him, because I don't like to talk about this, but yes, Guns N' Roses, for the first time ever, I mean, I've been seeing him for 30 years, the first time ever, metal bands and rock bands have done this a lot, and they're definitely playing it a half step slower and tuned down a little bit.
For Axl.
It says the theory is to make the voice sound a little bit stronger, but Slash is becoming such an MVP because he's got to throw in so many notes. Like, he's making all these jam band kids like sweat, because if he wants to join the field, buddy, watch out.
That's what I'm seeing on Twitter.
Oh, it's insane. The first night after Hershey, the opening night of the tour, I was like, this dude would crush it in a jam band. He's covering so much weight on this tour.
Oh, man. I'm probably going to have to find my way to one of those September shows, you know. And who knows? I don't know when the next time I'm going to see Fish. I hope the next time you see Fish is out there in Vegas. But this is going to come out, this podcast come out right around the Gorge in Tahoe and Dick's. So
if the Gorge happens.
If it happens, you know, if any of it happens.
Good luck.
Well, speaking of, man, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you.
You know, the pleasure's mine. You know, check out Jason on the Rock and Wrestling Connection podcast. I went on a couple weeks ago to talk about rock and roll and pro wrestling, heels, the bad guys of both. But, you know, whatever episode...
It was amazing how many bad guys there are in the music business.
I know.
I guess the Me Too movement helped that out.
That sure did, among other things, and politics, and you name it. But I love Jason's pod. It's a healthy mix of both.
Oh.
It's super entertaining. And
TikTok, Rock and Wrestling Connection Pod.
You heard him. Check him out on TikTok. He does these little minute updates. There's some great Fish content on there as well. And yeah, Jason,
thanks again.
You're a dear friend. You're the man. Thanks for having me over. Thanks for coming on the pod, and we'll do it again down the road.
Absolutely. Peace and love. Peace and love.
Want to say big up yourself, J.A., Jason Abrams, Rock and Wrestling Connection podcast. and on TikTok, Rock and Wrestling Connection Pod. Jay is the man. I hope he keeps coming on the show for many years to come, because, he got me started doing this thing, calling in and co-hosting the Jason Abrams show back when he was in college, late 90s, so will it go round in circles? And we're going to wrap things up on episode 48, like we always do about this time, with the Vibe Junkie Jam. And a few weeks ago, for the 23rd anniversary of this performance, I revisited an entry from the Farmer's Almanac, which is a book that was an annual almanac, sort of encyclopedia of sorts of the fish from Vermont, different song breakdowns and set lists and reviews and stories, etc. And one performance and one entry really sticks with me. Never more so than this year, when one of my dear friends, Benny Dredd, Benjamin Kennedy, sadly took his own life and hung himself back in late April, early May. And still wrestling with that grief. And then the anniversary of the Smashing Pumpkins cover Rhinoceros, which opened a show at Deer Creek back in the summer of '98. And I was once again overwhelmed with the feels and the grief and the nostalgia for a number of losses that have transpired this year and that continue to haunt me and many of us in various ways. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but to me this is the ultimate tribute, testament, nod, and loving gesture and gift from the band to an audience member. So to wrap things up today for the Vibe Junkie Jam, we're going to do the Rhinoceros from August 3rd, 1998 in Deer Creek. But before we hear that, you're going to hear this entry from Kevin Castles, the former editor of the Farmer's Almanac. So I'll be reading in his first person. August 3rd, 1998. Quote, I've always had a strange feeling that Fish was much greater than the sum of its parts. A spiritual vehicle, if you will. When you experience those peak moments, a lot of thought goes into the whole concept of Fish in general, such as why they are so important to us. If you enjoy Fish for the right reasons, they seem like members of your own family. That's why I get so discouraged when I hear fans going astray because they saw 2 mediocre shows in a row, or they didn't get to a Lushington encore. If your mother's being a pain in the butt, do you disown her? Or do you stick by her side through thick and thin? Fish is family. Even at their worst, they are better than any other live act in the country. Fish becomes a family situation of greater proportions when you go on tour. Friends become part of the whole concept, as do memories on tour with those very friends. In 1996, I began taking my brother Phil to Fish shows. He was already into the band, but it was difficult to get him out of the house. My brother was very depressed about life. What, in general, I don't know. But I know we all felt helpless trying to aid the poor guy. It was like pulling teeth to get him agree to come to Clifford Ball. But once we were there, I knew it was the cure he had been waiting for. There we sat on a hill overlooking the sunset, taking in the last few moments of a brutal Bowie jam. A few more shows followed, but by '97, he'd quit going. In fact, he'd quit doing most of anything by that point, deeply depressed. He took his own life on October 5, 1997. While I was at a friend's house playing music, he drove his truck to the top of a mountain and hung himself at sunset, with nothing but a pack of cigarettes and a Smashing Pumpkins album in the truck's tape player. I needed Fish's music more than ever after a blow like this. It seemed the only place to get away from all the madness was somewhere deep within a Fish jam. The Hampton 97 Slave, perhaps, or the 5385 Eyes masterpiece. As with all tragedies, you never get over it. You just learn to live with it. For several months, I bottled up quite a bit of anger, quite a bit of pain, and a lot of self-depression. A move that was very dangerous in hindsight, putting my own mental health at risk. I kept seeing Fish, and just about every song jerked a tear or two, but I always held back. The only other person I knew held such emotional affinity towards a band was Phil. The way he felt about Smashing Pumpkins was paralleled only by my affection for Fish, as he depended on the music, learned from it, and used it as medicine or a drug in times of need. It was the last thing he ever listened to, the last song being Rhinoceros, a heartfelt epic with poignant lyrics and a powerful message. For some reason, he chose this as the last song he wanted to hear before he turned his back on the world. Whew. As time went on and I began to actually understand that Phil was never coming back, my habit for holding my feelings in just increased, thus thrusting myself into my own mild wave of depression. Luckily, my wonderful girlfriend and I were weeks away from Fish's 1998 Deer Creek shows, where I assured myself everything would be better. The first night, I again felt a very strong connection with the boys, as they were a lot like my brother when they were kids. Shy, self-conscious, and out of place. I held back tears for Lifeboy in an effort to avoid any pain I may have been feeling, lying to myself in order to stay happy. The next night, I expected a nice NICU opener, or maybe a surprise Golgi. Something exciting to dance to. But instead, I heard feedback. A little puzzled, I began to hear a familiar tune, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Neither could the audience. Then my stomach dropped. It was the Smashing Pumpkins' Rhinoceros. Obviously, I broke down in an embarrassing display of tears and emotion, literally sobbing uncontrollably and making a scene. And it was exactly what I needed. Pure therapy and cleansing by way of the band, through the words of my brother, who I know was using Fish to speak to me that night. It was his way of saying I'm okay. Trey had a very, very prophetic look in his eye that spooked me to no end for the entire song, as if he knew what he was doing to me. As the song ended, I sat down and tried to gather myself. Though moments ago I was sobbing with sadness, suddenly I felt brand new, like a new me had been constructed to go forward from this day on. So then came Haley's, the happiest Fish song of them all. The new me stood up and danced like a madman, with an ear-to-ear grin and a pure state of natural ecstasy. Not only was everything going to be okay, but I was now content, and at a state of closure with my brother's death, probably because he spoke through Fish and assured me he was all right. That's the point where I knew that I would always give Fish my undying love and support, no matter what struggles they might go through. After all, they need us just as much as we need them, mistakes and all. Kevin Castles. Never fails to just tear at the heartstrings. What a tale, what a band, what a community. Life beyond a dream indeed. So that one and this one is for you, Benny Dredd. We love you. We miss you so. We miss Chris Zegers. So many of our dearly departed. So this Rhinoceros is for everybody who's left us prematurely. And we'll see you on the other side. Episode 48, the Upful Life Podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz. Goodbye. God bless. and we'll see you next time. Yes, indeedy.